My son sent me a text on a Tuesday afternoon in October, 3 months before his wedding. The wedding I was writing a $55,000 check for. Mom, Lynette and I talked, and we think it's better if you're not part of the speech portion of the evening. It's nothing personal. The Alderton side has a lot of family traditions around that part of the program, and we want to keep it flowing. You'll still be there, and that's what matters, right? I read it sitting at my kitchen table in Sudbury with a cup of tea gone cold beside me and the contractor estimate for my back deck still open on the counter. I read it twice. Then I put the phone face down on the table, looked out the window at the gray October sky, and thought about the fact that I had just wired the deposit on a ballroom in downtown Ottawa, and my name wasn't going to be anywhere near a microphone inside it. I picked the phone back up. I typed 11 words. Then I'll redirect the $55,000 to my retirement account instead. I pressed send. I set the phone down again. And then, before my son could call me back in a panic, before his fiancée could get involved, before the Alderton family could have their opinion about what the cleaning lady's daughter thought she was entitled to, I called my accountant. She had already sent the stop payment notice on the deposit transfer by the time my son dialed my number. Let me back up, because the text didn't come out of nowhere, and neither did I. My name is Meredith. I'm 63 years old, and I have been running a residential and commercial cleaning company in Northern Ontario for 31 years. I started it with a secondhand vacuum, a borrowed minivan, and 2 clients, a physiotherapy clinic on Lorne Street, and a retired school principal who wanted her bungalow cleaned every second Friday. My son was 5 years old. His father had been gone for 2 years by then, not dead, just done with us, which is its own kind of grief, because you can't even be properly sad about it without someone reminding you he's still out there somewhere. I did what women like me do. I got up early, and I worked late, and I made it count. 31 years later, Clearhaven Property Services has 42 employees, contracts with 3 medical office buildings, a school board, and every Tim Hortons location in the Sudbury Basin. I'm not flashy about it. I drive the same truck I drove 6 years ago. I still go out on jobs sometimes, not because I have to, but because I started this with my hands, and I intend to know what my hands built. My son grew up watching me load supplies on Saturday mornings. He knows exactly what this company cost, or I thought he did. He met Lynette Alderton at a conference in Ottawa 4 years ago. She's smart. She works in government communications, and she has a way of saying things that sounds collaborative and feels like a door closing. I noticed that about her at the first dinner, but she loves my son. I believe that, and so I loved her too, the way you love the person your child has chosen, with your whole heart and your fingers crossed. The Aldertons are a prominent Ottawa family. Old name, good connections, the kind of people whose grandparents went to Rideau Hall for dinner and still talk about it. Her father, Douglas, is a semi-retired civil servant who golfs with people whose names appear in The Citizen. Her mother, Pamela, has the posture of a woman who has never once carried her own groceries, and the smile of a woman who has always made someone else feel slightly inadequate for doing so. She is not a cruel person. I want to be fair. She is a woman who has spent 60 years in rooms where she was the most important person, and she genuinely cannot process the idea that someone she's decided is beneath her might be holding the only working pen. They welcomed my son into their family with the warmth of people who could see he was exceptional. They welcomed me with the warmth of people who could see I was paying for the wedding. The engagement dinner was at the Aldertons' home in the Glebe. A beautiful old house, original hardwood, the kind of place that costs more to maintain than most people earn. I brought a good bottle of wine and a handwritten card. Pamela took the wine and set it on the sideboard without reading the label, which is fine. I'm not a wine snob. What stayed with me was the way she introduced me to her sister. "This is Meredith," she said, "Colin's mother. She runs a cleaning operation up in Sudbury." A little pause. "Very industrious." I've been called worse. I smiled and said thank you and asked her sister how long she'd been in Ottawa. But that word, operation, sat in my chest for the rest of the dinner, an operation. Like I ran a hot dog cart, I offered to pay for the wedding before anyone asked. I want that on record. Nobody came to me with a budget shortfall or a favor to ask. I sat down with my son a month after the engagement and I said, I want to give you the wedding you deserve. Tell me what you're dreaming of and let's see what we can do. He cried a little. He's always been a crier, my boy, which I've always loved about him. He said, Mom, you don't have to. And I said, I know I don't have to. That's why I want to. $55,000 Canadian. Every dollar earned by 42 people who showed up on time and did their jobs well, and by me who trained them. I was proud of that number. It felt like proof of something. I should tell you how I handled the money, because it's the part that mattered most in the end, and the part nobody saw coming. I did not write a check to my son and Lynette. I am a businesswoman. I have been a businesswoman for 31 years, and I have learned the hard way. With a client who skipped on 6 months of invoices and a supplier who delivered half a contract and disappeared, that the only promise that holds up is the one with your signature on it, not someone else's. I contacted every vendor directly. The venue, a hotel ballroom in downtown Ottawa, non-refundable deposit required by September, balance due 60 days before the event. The caterer, the florist, the photographer. A string quartet for the ceremony that Lynette had found through someone at work. I signed each contract personally. Meredith Halloran, signing party responsible for payment. My accountant, Barb, reviewed everything before I signed anything. She circled the cancellation clauses on each one and said, Meredith, you're the only name on these. You know what that means. I said I did, she said. Just making sure. Because it's your money and your name, and if anything ever goes sideways, you're the one with the authority here. I filed everything in a blue binder I keep for important things, and I told myself I'd never need to know that. I forgot she said it for about 4 months. Then things started to shift. It was gradual the way bad things always are. A comment here, a decision made without me there. The venue's menu tasting. I found out about it afterward when Lynette mentioned in passing that she and her mother had gone and sorted everything out. I'd paid the deposit on that venue. I'd signed the contract. I hadn't been invited to taste the food. I told myself it was an oversight. They were busy. Ottawa and Sudbury aren't close. Then the engagement photos came out. Beautiful pictures, my son looking so happy, Lynette radiant. There was a series of them with family. Her parents, her sister, her grandmother. Not one photo with me, not one. I'd driven down for the engagement party. I'd been there. I just wasn't in the story they were telling about where this marriage came from. The rehearsal dinner location was chosen without me. When I asked my son about it, he said Pamela had a connection through the golf club, and it was just easier to let her coordinate. Easier for who, I didn't say. I just nodded and made a note to call and confirm my own attendance. Then the speech program. The wedding program listed 6 speakers for the evening. The best man, the maid of honor, Lynette's father, Lynette's sister, a friend of the couple from university, and my son himself, who was apparently speaking about Lynette. I'm not in that list. I noticed it on the draft itinerary they emailed, a draft they'd emailed to Pamela first, and she'd forwarded to me, which is itself something, and I called my son. There seems to be a mistake, I said. I'm not on the speech list. The pause before he answered was all the answer I needed. So, he said, and his voice had that carefully neutral quality I'd heard him use at work calls. The thing is, the Alderton side has these traditions around the speeches. And Pamela really wanted to keep it to a certain number, and it got a little complicated to fit everyone. And Lynette thought it might actually be smoother if the mother of the groom doesn't speak at her son's wedding. Mom, it's not like that. What's it like then? It's just Pamela has this whole. She did this at Lynette's cousin's wedding too. It's like a family thing. They have a format, and the format doesn't have room for me. He didn't answer that. He said, You'll still be there. You'll be right there at the family table. I said, Let me think about it. And I hung up. I told my friend Harriet about it the next morning. We've been friends for 22 years. She was my second employee, back when it was just the 2 of us and the minivan, and more ambition than sense. And she runs my operations now. She's the kind of friend who will tell you the truth the way a doctor tells you bad news. matter-of-factly, because she respects you enough not to soften it. We were in my office at the warehouse, and I told her the whole thing. The speech list, the menu tasting I didn't know about, the engagement photos, the way Pamela said operation. Harriet set down her coffee. Meredith, she said, listen to yourself. You're paying $55,000 to be thanked by nobody. It's Colin's wedding. It's Colin's wedding that you're paying for, she said. Every vendor in Ottawa thinks you're the client because you are the client. Your name is on every single contract. And you're sitting here asking me if maybe the reason they didn't invite you to the tasting was that they were busy. She shook her head. My mother used to clean houses. She was the smartest person I ever knew, and people talked to her like she was furniture. And I watched it happen, and I never said a thing, and I regret it to this day. She looked at me steady. Don't let your son watch you sit in the back and smile. That's the worst thing you could teach him. I drove home that evening, turning it over. Harriet was right, and I knew she was right. And I still told myself I'd find a way to make it work. I'm good at making things work. 31 years of early mornings and difficult clients, and I have never once walked away from a job that could be saved. Then my son sent the text. I want to tell you about what happened in the hour before he called me back, because it matters. I didn't sit and cry. I'd spent 4 months getting quietly erased from my own son's wedding, and I was out of patience for crying about it. I went to the shelf in my office where I keep the blue binder. I opened it. I checked the dates. The wedding was 91 days out. The venue contract had a cancellation clause. Cancellations received more than 90 days prior to the event date will receive a full refund of the deposit. I was 3 months out, and one day, I was, by exactly 24 hours, inside the full refund window. I called Barb. She answered on the second ring. I told her about the text in about 90 seconds. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, in the voice she uses when she's already running numbers, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to stop the transfer on the venue balance, invoke the cancellation clause on every contract I signed, and get back every dollar I'm owed." "Meredith," she said, "you understand that means there's no wedding. Not with these vendors, not on this date." "I understand exactly what it means," I said. "They want my $55,000, and they want me to sit quietly while her father gives the only parent speech of the evening. They can't have both. I'm choosing which one I keep." Barb said, "All right, some of this I can start tonight." "Start tonight," I said. "I want it time-stamped before my son can call anyone and tell a different version of events." There was a pause. Then she said, "You read every contract before you signed it, didn't you?" "I always read everything before I sign it," I said. "It's the only reason a woman who started with a second-hand vacuum ever has anything." She started making calls. I sat in my kitchen with the blue binder on the table, and I waited. Because I knew my son would call. He did. He called at 7:43. I know because I looked at the time before I answered, the way you look at the clock before something important. He was already upset when I picked up. He'd heard from the venue. Barb had reached the event coordinator on the emergency line and sent the written cancellation notice before 7. "Mom, what did you do?" His voice was high, which it only gets when he's frightened. "Patricia from the hotel just called Lynette and said the booking's being canceled. She said your accountant called." "Mom, the wedding's in 3 months. 91 days, I said. 1 day, inside the full refund window. I checked. You can't. What are you?" "Mom, everyone's already been invited. Lynette's grandmother has a flight booked from Halifax. What are you doing?" "I'm doing exactly what I said I would do," I said. My voice was very calm. 31 years of staying calm when things go wrong. "You told me I could be there as long as I kept paying, but that the speech portion was for the Alderton family traditions, so I stopped paying. You can keep the traditions. They didn't cost you anything." "You're not being fair." His voice cracked. "It's one speech, Mom." "It's not. You're blowing up my entire wedding because you didn't get a speech." I let that sit for a moment. Then I said, "I want you to think about what you just said. Really think about it. You said I'm blowing up your wedding." Silence. "I've been attending your wedding for 8 months, I said. "I signed the contracts. I paid the deposits. I drove to Ottawa 4 times for planning meetings. I found out about the menu tasting after it happened. I wasn't in a single engagement photo. And last week you sent me a text to let me know that the speech portion of the evening was reserved for the family. And the family doesn't include me. I paused. I didn't blow up your wedding, son. I stopped funding the one where I wasn't in it. He was quiet. I could hear him breathing. Lynette is going to. Her mother is going to. He stopped. I know, I said gently. I know it's going to be hard, and I'm sorry for that part. I am genuinely sorry for that part. But I need to say something, and I need you to hear it, even if you're not ready to hear it tonight. I looked at my hands on the table, the rough ones, the ones that loaded the van at 5 in the morning when he was small enough to sleep in a car seat in the back. I raised you alone, I said. I built a company from a borrowed minivan, and I paid for your university, and I drove 4 hours round trip to every one of your hockey games in Timmins, and I have never once asked you to be grateful. I didn't need you to be grateful. I needed you to see me, not in row 6 behind the cousins, not as the person who handles the bill, just as your mother, in the room, for the night that matters. That's all I wanted. And when I asked for it, you sent me a text that said, the traditions don't have room for me. The quality of his silence had changed. She's going to say I'm overreacting, he said quietly, and I knew he meant Lynette. Maybe she will, I said. But you're not 6 years old. You don't have to say it just because she does. I told him to get some sleep. I told him we'd talk when he wasn't in shock. And I hung up. Pamela called the next morning at 8:35. I was already at the warehouse. I let it go to voicemail. The voicemail was 8 minutes long, which is an achievement. It moved through graciousness, then confusion, then wounded dignity, and landed finally on the suggestion that I was a deeply unsophisticated person who had allowed a misunderstanding to spiral into something embarrassing for everyone involved. She said she hoped I would come to my senses before I caused any more disruption. She used the phrase, our side of the family, 4 times, without appearing to notice what that phrase implied about my side. I called her back at noon. I was in my truck in a parking lot in Sudbury, in my work jacket, with the blue binder on the passenger seat. I want you to picture that, because the contrast is important. Pamela in her glebe house with the beautiful floors. Me in a truck I own outright with the contracts for her daughter's wedding on the seat beside me, every one of them signed by me. Pamela, I said, I got your message. Meredith, thank goodness. Now, I think if we all just take a breath. I'm quite calm, I said. I've been calm this whole time. That's not the issue. Well, the issue is that you've put everyone in a very difficult position, and I think if we can just find a way to restore the bookings and perhaps revisit the program. Revisit the program, I said. You mean put me on the speech list? Well, I wouldn't have phrased it quite that. Pamela, I said. Let me save us both some time. I'm not asking for a speech. I'm not going to hold the wedding hostage over a microphone. I canceled the contracts because your daughter told my son to tell me that the traditions don't have room for me, and I decided that if there's no room for me, there was no reason for my money to be there either. I paused. The contracts are in my name. They always were. I'm the responsible party on everything. I had the right to cancel, and I exercised it. That's not a tantrum. That's a business decision. The silence on her end was a different kind than my son's. His was grief. Hers was recalculation. You can't seriously intend to let this fall apart, she said finally. Over a speech. Over a seat at a table. Over being included in my son's wedding as his mother, I said, which is different from a seat or a speech. It's about being treated like family and not like a vendor. We have always treated you as Pamela. I said it once, quiet. You introduced me to your bridge club as the woman who runs Colin's mother's cleaning operation. You scheduled the tasting without calling me. You sent me the program through your own forwarded email, which means you saw it before I did. And then you told my son to tell me the speech portion was reserved for the Alderton side. I waited. I'm not angry about any one of those things. I'm telling you what they add up to. She didn't speak. If you and Douglas want to plan a wedding, I said, you're welcome to. I genuinely mean that. I hope Colin and Lynette have a beautiful day and a long, happy marriage. But the beautiful day I was building, The one with my name on the contracts and my money in the deposits, that one isn't available anymore. I closed the binder and started the truck. The week that followed was the most instructive one of my son's adult life. Because once my $55,000 was no longer in the room, the Aldertons had to have a conversation they had been expertly avoiding for the entire engagement. What could they actually pay for? The answer was, not this. Douglas Alderton's pension is comfortable but not extravagant. The Glebe house has a mortgage on it still. They are a family of good appearances and careful accounting, and they had been, I understood now, quietly counting on my money to fund the impression they wanted to give at their daughter's wedding. The string quartet, the hotel ballroom, the dinner for 160 guests, none of that was ever theirs to offer. It had always been mine. They'd just gotten so comfortable with my checks that they'd started treating my money as an Alderton resource. The way I'd notice that people in nice houses treat the person who keeps them clean. After a while, you stop seeing the hands. My son saw all of it. That's what mattered. With my money out of the room, the Aldertons had nothing to perform with. And the performance, I think, was what Lynette had always loved most about them. She watched her mother make calls and hit walls. She watched her father get very quiet. And she watched my son, and this is the part he told me. Later, she watched my son get steadily angrier. Not at me. At the situation he was in. At the text he'd sent. At the week of his fiancée's mother trying to manage a crisis that never should have been a crisis. He came to Sudbury the following Saturday. Alone. Without calling first, which he never does. He's a caller, my boy. Always has been. I saw his car in the driveway from the kitchen window, and I stood there for a moment before I went to the door. He sat at the same table where he'd done his homework in elementary school with my work jacket soaking in the laundry sink. He looked like he hadn't slept properly in a week, which I suspected was accurate. I handled it wrong, he said. Not preamble, just that. I know, I said. I sat down across from him and I didn't say anything else because he wasn't done. I kept telling myself it was small things, he said. Each thing by itself seemed small. The tasting, the photos. And I let it happen because I didn't want to fight about it. And every time I didn't fight, the next thing was a little easier to let go. Until it wasn't small anymore. He looked up. And I sent you that text. I wrote it and I sent it. He shook his head. Mom, I told my mother to pay and be quiet. You told me the traditions didn't have room, I said gently. You might not have heard yourself say the rest of it, but that's what it meant. He was quiet for a moment. She's been upset with me this week, he said. She wanted me to call you and ask you to put the money back, and I kept not doing it. And she asked me why, and I said I didn't know. He paused. I do know. I kept thinking about you at those hockey games. You drove 4 hours in the dark. Every time. And you never once asked me to remember it. You just did it. He looked at his hands on the table. I remembered it this week. You don't owe me the hockey games, I said. You don't owe me anything. Ever. That's not what this is about. I know, he said. That's sort of the point. We talked for a long time. About the Aldertons and what he'd watched happen when the money left and what he thought about what he'd watched. He said something that I've turned over many times since. He said, I think I was so relieved someone was taking care of the wedding that I stopped paying attention to who was being taken care of. I told him that was an honest thing to say. Pamela arrived at my house the following week. She called first this time, to her credit. She asked if she could come, and I said yes, because I had nothing to hide in my own kitchen, and because my son was there, and I thought it mattered for him to watch. She came in looking like a woman who had rehearsed this on the drive from Ottawa. She sat down. She accepted coffee. She told me that she hadn't meant for things to get to this point, and that she hoped I understood. There had been no intent to exclude me, and that the speech program had been a matter of logistics more than anything, and that she hoped we could find a way forward together. I poured my own coffee and I sat down and I looked at her. Pamela, I said, I believe you didn't intend a lot of it. I think most of it happened the way these things happen. One small comfortable decision at a time, each one easier because the one before it had gone fine. I looked at my cup. But intent isn't the whole story. At some point, the result is also the story, and the result was that I spent 8 months paying for a wedding where the mother of the groom wasn't in the photos or the program or the tasting. She started to say something. I kept going, not unkindly. "I'm not asking you to apologize for 8 months," I said. "I'm telling you what I need if we're going forward. I need to be treated as Colin's mother, not as the billing contact, not as Lynette's mother's equal in an organizational chart, not as a vendor, as his mother. That means I hear about things at the same time as you. That means when someone makes a list of family speeches, the mother of the groom is on it. That means when there's a photo of family at the engagement, I'm in it." I paused. "That's not a long list. It's actually a very short list." Pamela was quiet. She was looking at her coffee cup and doing something with her expression that I recognized from my own experience as the specific effort of a proud person trying to be fair. "I think," she said slowly, "that I got so involved in the planning that I started thinking of it as mine to plan." A pause. "And Douglas and I, we're not. The financial situation isn't what it perhaps appeared. I think I was grateful for your contribution in a way I never properly said out loud. And I think that gratitude got," she searched for the word, "absorbed into everything else. And you stopped being the reason we could have the wedding and became just the payment." That was the most honest thing she'd said to me. "I think it cost her something. Thank you for saying that," I said. And I meant it. My son was sitting at the end of the table and I heard him let out a breath. We talked for 2 hours. By the end of it, we had agreed on a path. My son and Lynette would plan a wedding, scaled back, more modest, nothing like what the original had been, because I wasn't putting $55,000 back into a budget from scratch, but real. A proper dinner for 80 people at a restored heritage hall outside of Ottawa, a good photographer, a simple menu. My son's budget, plus what the Aldertons could actually commit to. And when the program went out, it listed 5 speakers: the best man, the maid of honor, Lynette's father, Lynette's sister, and me. I didn't give a long speech. I've never been a person who needs a long speech. I said that I had loved my son every day of his life, that I had watched him grow into a person I genuinely liked and admired, which is different from love and maybe rarer, and that I hoped he and Lynette built a life together that made them proud. I said that in my experience, the weddings that last aren't the ones that cost the most. They're the ones where everyone in the room can see the couple sees each other. And I said I could see that, and I sat down. Lynette cried. That surprised me. She had not been, in my experience, an easy crier. Afterward, when the dancing had started and the tables were pushed back, she came and found me. She sat down next to me and she said, "I want to apologize to you." Just that, straight out. I let my mother run things and I didn't push back when I should have, and I think I was scared of losing her approval if I did. And that's mine. It's not on you, and it's not on Colin. I looked at her for a moment. "Thank you," I said. "That's not easy to say." "I know," she said. "I watched you do a harder one. I figured I owed it to you." What I did with the money, the $55,000 that had come back to my account, I'll tell you, because the ending matters as much as the confrontation. I didn't spend it on the smaller wedding. That came from elsewhere. I split it 3 ways. I put 1/3 into a tax-free savings account I've been meaning to top up for 4 years, and which my financial advisor has been gently asking me about since before the pandemic. I gave 1/3 to my operations manager, Harriet, who told me the truth when I needed it. As a bonus, she'd earned 3 times over and never asked for, and the last 1/3 I put into a registered education fund in the name of any grandchildren who might one day arrive. Money that isn't for a party. Money that's for the long game, the way every dollar I ever earned has been. "You should have kept all of it," my son said when I told him. "I kept what I needed," I said. "The rest was doing more good somewhere else." He didn't push it. He knows me well enough by now to know that I don't make financial decisions on sentiment, and that when I say something is doing good where it is, I've done the math. We're good now, my son and I. We talk more than we did before all of this, which is the strange gift in the middle of it. The difficult thing that opened a door we'd both been too busy to notice was a little stuck. He's thoughtful about Lynette's family in a different way than he was, not suspicious, just clear-eyed. He knows now what happens when you let someone run something that matters to you without checking in. He learned it at some cost to both of us, and I think he'll carry it for a long time. Pamela and I are not close. I don't think we will be. We're cordial at family events, which is enough. She's a woman who organized her life around appearances, and I'm a woman who organized my life around reality, and those two things don't blend easily. But she looks at me differently than she did. I noticed it at Christmas, something in it that wasn't there before. I think it's called respect. I think it took her by surprise, frankly. People ask me if I regret it. Canceling everything, pulling the money back, making it hard, and I understand why they ask. It looks drastic from the outside. It looks like a woman blowing up her son's wedding over a speech slot and a bruised ego. Here's what I tell them. I spent 8 months being patient. I was patient through the tasting and the photos and the forwarded emails and the word operation. I gave everyone the benefit of every doubt I had, and I had a lot of them, because I love my son and I wanted things to work. Patient didn't work. What worked was 200 words in a blue binder and an accountant who picked up on the second ring. I don't regret the contracts. I signed them carefully because I sign everything carefully, because I am a woman who started from nothing and has kept everything she has by knowing what she agreed to and holding people to what they agreed to in return. The contracts weren't a trap. They were just what they were, the honest record of who the responsible party was. They didn't lie when everything else got complicated. They never do. And if there's one thing I'd pass on from all of it, it's this. When you love someone, a child, a partner, a friend, your love is not a blank check. Your generosity is not the same thing as permission to take from you. The moment someone tries to keep what you give and set aside who you are, the moment they want your open hand and your closed mouth, that is the moment to remember whose name is on the contract. Mine was on all of them. It still is.